Oh, did I make him sick? I somehow blame myself for his own illness.
That's brutal. Hey, I'm Tom.
And I'm Andy.
And this is On the Node, a podcast about two best mates and one cancer journey. Andy, how are you, mate?
I'm pretty good. I've had a good week of freedom outside a hospital.
Freedom!
Yeah, freedom.
What have you been doing?
Well, we filmed the previous episode.
We did.
On Wednesday. And otherwise, it's just been sort of eating food that isn't hospital food. It's been a primary use of my time, going to the gym. And just preparing myself, really.
For?
The next round, which is a long stay. But we'll talk about that another time.
That we will. On that note, what are we talking about, or who are we talking about today?
We actually have a very special guest.
Cheers.
Maybe the most special guest
Cheers.
that will ever be on this show.
Ever.
And so we'd love to introduce Lan, who you've all heard in the background laughing on a couple of episodes, and we've referenced her a few times.
Because we're so funny.
Say hi.
Hi. Hello, everybody. Hello, podcasters.
Yeah. Lan, how are you?
Good. Thank
Yeah?
you. Bit nervous, but I think that's very natural.
Excited to be on the
here.
node?
Thank you for having me.
Not at all. So I think we talked about it a couple of times, maybe in episode 1 and certainly episode 2, about the importance of having had Lan in your life, frankly, through the initial diagnosis, but then latterly through your journey. That was, I suppose, your prism. And I think we wanted to talk to Lan specifically about her prism, because, you know, as with any great story, any coin, there are two sides to it, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, as you said, we've, as friends, have become a lot closer through this experience and just generally, over time growing in friendship. But for Lan and I, that was very much a shared journey. I was obviously the patient and Lan was my primary carer. So Lan's been with me every step of this. So
yeah, and I think it was when you first said partner and primary carer, I think it was either on episode 1 or episode 2. I think 2, yeah. I'd never heard you speak about, obviously in your mind you would have thought about Lan in that regard, but actually vocalizing it definitely struck me. Okay, partner's one thing, but primary carer is different kettle of fish entirely. Which brings us on to you, Lan. I guess with any story we talk about the beginning. We won't talk about too much about you and Andy's beginnings, but before the diagnosis, there was you and Andy without the diagnosis, right? So tell us really briefly kind of how you met, how bad his chat was. And then we could get to the other stuff soon enough.
Well, Andy and I met like a lot of millennials, how a lot of millennials and Gen Zers meet nowadays. We met on online dating app.
The modern way.
Yeah. Do you guys know what that's like? Have you guys ever been on the dating app?
You
and Helen.
I've never had to.
But yeah, we met on the dating app on our first date. This is when we were still in Vietnam together, and on our first date, Andy asked me out for tapas and wine.
How romantic.
Night. Yeah,
tapas,
it was very romantic.
classic.
But yeah.
Crustaceans. I see what you're doing there, mate.
Yeah, it was a very romantic gesture. But the thing is, he failed to tell me that it was a tapas and wine night. And he asked me to meet him at 8. And in Vietnam, Vietnamese, we eat really early. Like I can eat dinner at 5.
Yeah.
Happily.
You're preaching to the converted here.
So I ate before. I thought it was, a first meeting over drinks. And I ate before I came to see Andy. And I also don't drink wine. So, well, I showed up. Andy had tapas and wine alone, and I sat there with my rum and coke, and we had the best
Nice.
chat, I guess.
Yeah, so basically the answer was the chat was so good that
So
even I
good.
messed up the entire invitation,
Yeah.
failed to inform her of anything. We're still here
And
many
the,
years
and
later.
the 10 rum and cokes had nothing to do with it,
No,
obviously.
no.
Oh, and before he came to see me, he was also wearing a dress as well. But that's a
Let's
story.
that is definitely a bonus episode. Bonus ep.
He got out of
forthcoming.
his beautiful princess gown and came to see me at tapas and
This
wine
is
night.
genuinely the first I've heard about this, mate. You've been
Good.
rumbled.
Yeah, I have. And no doubt I'm very rosy right now.
Very, very, very rouge. Like the wine you were drinking. Anyway, okay, fast forward. So then, obviously, Andy and I have known each other since we
Too
were
long.
21, yeah, far too long. All right, mate. And then I first met you December 2019, December 18, right? That's
I
when you
think
first came
18.
to Hong Kong.
No,
right?
you met before you came to
So
Vietnam.
you
Oh,
visit, yeah.
yes.
I met you in Vietnam for sure.
Yeah, in July.
Yeah, that was when you.
Yeah, the stuff we've talked about that. We don't need to cover old ground. So yeah, came to Hong Kong December 2018, and obviously you were building your life together, really, as a couple and as a partnership. And then this bombshell happened in December 22. So that would have been almost pretty much 4 years to the day that you landed in Hong Kong. I guess from a partner's perspective, Lan, and Andy's spoken very candidly and emotionally about, you know, the fact that you weren't there, nothing to do with you or your fault or anyone's fault. It was just timing and highly unfortunate. I guess, what was your initial reaction? How did you find out? And what is going through your body and your mind when you're hearing this news?
I think I'm going to rewind a little bit,
Sure.
and I want to talk about. I had my first reaction when Andy told me it was a possibility. He had just he was just released from the public hospital. We were at home. We were just talking to each other. At that point, we still thought that it was the tropical disease and less likely anything else. And he told me that one of the differential diagnosis, I think that's what it's called, that one of them could be lymphoma. And at that point, I mean, I knew that it was a possibility, but it was so small. And it was just stuff that we were reading online. I was reading off of Google, so it didn't feel real. But at that point, it felt it felt a lot more. It hit a lot harder because it was coming from the doctors that was caring for him, and not just me and Andy reading stuff off of Google. And the moment I heard lymphoma, I just felt like someone punched me in the stomach. My stomach dropped. I had to go into our bedroom, close the door, and just had a moment to myself to compose. And I remember, I at that point, even though it wasn't true, but I felt like my world was going to end. So yeah, that was my first reaction. And when Andy actually got the diagnosis after the biopsy, I had already had my initial reaction. I had already had that explosive emotion. So I didn't experience the same magnitude of emotion, I guess. But Andy told this story. I wasn't with him when he received the diagnosis, the formal diagnosis, and what I felt the most at that moment was guilt because I wasn't there. And I remember thinking that I can't believe that I'm not there, even though I was home cooking him food. I was away for good reasons, but I just remember thinking I'm never going to forgive myself for this, for not being there for him.
Have you forgiven yourself?
I verbalize forgiveness. Does that count?
And I have never, I knew that this was going to break.
Yeah, you said that, right?
Was going to eat away at Lan. So it's never something I've ever held against her. I never had any blame or for absence or anything like that, because I knew the moment I knew that she would feel terrible for not being there at that moment.
Yeah.
So did you find out over the phone from Andy?
Yeah, I finally picked up my phone. I'm very bad with my phone.
Particularly when you're in the kitchen.
Yes, yeah.
Because by the way, just
knives
Lan's an amazing cook. Yeah, so I can imagine you being just
I was
dedicated to rustling up an amazing meal.
I remember what it was. It was pumpkin and pork risotto.
Oh, lovely.
I haven't made that since.
In.
Right.
No,
well,
it's cursed. Don't ever make it again.
I know what I'm having for dinner tomorrow.
No, the question initially was, you found out over the phone.
Yeah.
You picked up your phone, and then did you go straight to hospital, or did you have to? Yeah.
I don't even know if I managed to grab the risotto that I didn't.
You put everything down.
Much to Andy's dismay.
No. Yeah, I think you put everything down and just
I just got in a cab. I went straight to the hospital, and I wanted to stay on the phone with Andy, but I think maybe I was panicking so much, and I said, I just remember being on the phone saying to Andy, I'll be right there, I'll be right there. It's going to be fine, everything's going to be fine. I'll be right there. You okay? I was just, I couldn't stop talking. I don't think I let Andy, after Andy told me the diagnosis, I don't think I gave him a chance to speak. So I remember him saying, Lan, it's fine, don't panic. You're freaking me out as well. So let's just try and get here as soon as you can, and we'll talk then. Yeah.
Which I think is a really good segue then into the next question that I had, is obviously that initial shock and kind of transitions into a normalization where obviously Andy's coping with his diagnosis himself, but also as his primary carer and partner, you're having to cope as well. Like, talk to us a bit about your mechanisms.
Chime in, because I know what I was experiencing, but maybe your observation's different. But I'm naturally a problem solver. I'm solution oriented. I went into I went into project management mode, and it was all about what are the next steps, what are we doing next, what are the best things to do, what are the doctors saying, just focusing on finding the best doctors, like Andy said in the previous episodes, finding the best hospitals that has the right equipment, and what are the right medication, what is the right diet, what can I cook for him, all of these things. So I just went into almost like project management overdrive, and that just took over, and it kept me busy, it kept my mind from spiraling, and that was how I coped, really.
Yeah. And that was go on, Andy. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna sort of supplement, like, so as Lan's described, she kind of hyper focused into the whole thing, and where I was sort of kind of processing it all emotionally, and therefore not really that practical.
Yeah.
I was kind of like just doing what I was told, essentially, like what the doctors were telling me I was going out and doing, whereas Lan was reading, medical academic journals and papers to kind of find out these sort of dietary, what's going to complement the chemotherapy in the most to increase the efficacy. That's it. Of the treatment. So essentially the effectiveness of the treatment, how, like the likelihood of success and cure. So that's something that I'll always be, super thankful for. And also, I think Lan really helped me in that immediate moment with sharing the emotional burden. Where I think we mentioned it on episode 3 when we talked about reactions, was where I started sort of telling friends the day I found out.
Yeah.
And after sort of telling like 3 or 4 people, it just got really overwhelming.
Oh, yeah.
But there were people I still wanted to know, and Lan sort of picked up that burden once she arrived at the hospital that day. She started texting friends who she might not normally, they might be my friends who she might not normally reach out to or text.
Yeah.
But she kind of brought them up to date and just said, give me some space and things, which was just so helpful when I was kind of a bit overwhelmed with it all.
Yeah, that makes sense. So Lan, what you described there is obviously the immediate plan, like straight into it, right? Once the plan had started to, materialize, and he started his chemo, what did that coping mechanism develop or morph into something less tactical? Or like how did you, what was that transition like to kind of focusing in on a specific outcome to that outcome is now being realized, but the realization that I'm still living with a partner that I'm having to care for, like almost from the tactical to the strategic coping mechanism? What did that journey look and feel like for you?
Well, after a few rounds of infusion, we started to get into sort of like a routine, because every infusion looks almost the same, and knock on wood, Andy's treatment last time and this time has been very smooth. It went really smooth the last time, and it's going, knock on wood again, very smoothly now. Very not many complications. So after a while, we just got into a routine. We knew that, okay, every 2 weeks, Andy goes in for the infusion, and he's gonna have a few days of feeling, the side effects, and we kind of knew what day which side effects would come on, after a while, I have to say, it got a little bit boring.
Yeah, essentially the pattern that became predictable just meant that we could plan around it, and there was and therefore the sort of response and action was just kind of business as usual. It was just
BAU.
But it's a very interesting question, Tom, because in the beginning, when everything was new, when we were still figuring things out, it was, like I said, like I went into project management overdrive, and I was busy all the time. We always had something to do, and something to plan, and we were trying all kinds of different things, but after a while, when we got into our routine, we knew what was gonna happen next, and etc. I felt like I had more time on my hands, and I didn't actually deal with the diagnosis or the treatment or what's happening to us on like an emotional level until much later, when I had more time on my hands, and that was very interesting as well, and because I'm not the most communicative person. I found myself having to sort of like internalize a lot of things. Like I had a lot of fear, anxiety, and pressure that I had to work through. And I realized that even though Andy and I had each other, and we were always talking and communicating with each other, I I still need to. I still needed to talk to my friends, reach out to my friends, reach out to my family, and have different perspectives and different advice. Given to me.
So
which is understandable.
Of course, 100%.
I'm the same. I talk to you for some reason.
Yeah. For your sins. So that's Lam, what you said there is really interesting, right? Because people talk about things like survivor's guilt, and you're referring to those emotions there, anxiety, etc., and almost delayed onset to an extent. And I guess there may have been a bit of guilt there, right? Because there's this kind of dichotomy that I'm feeling this way, but actually that's the person who's going through the treatment. Therefore, should I even be feeling this way, etc., etc.? Like, how did you confront, or did you feel feelings of guilt? If so, why did you feel those feelings? And then ultimately, what have you tried to do to not overcome them, because I guess they're still probably there to an extent, but manage them?
Well, the biggest guilt, as I shared earlier, was not being there for Andy to receive the diagnosis, and I still carry that with me. And like you said, Thelma, even though Andy was the one with the illness, is the one with the illness now, I was, how do I say this? I'm also experiencing the cancer, if that makes sense. And sometimes I have thoughts like, oh, why him? Why me? Why us? And then I feel guilty for having those thoughts. Why do I feel like a victim? Why am I acting like a victim and talking to myself in my head like I'm the victim? I'm not the victim. Andy is the one who's going through treatment. I'm healthy, I'm well, I shouldn't complain. And I have irrational thoughts like, oh, did I make him sick? I cook all of our meals. I decide what we eat. I decide what container we use at home. I had to deal with a lot of that, and I'm getting a bit emotional talking about it now still. I somehow blame myself for his own illness, which is completely irrational, and I know that it's irrational, but that's why they're called irrational thoughts, right? They're still there.
Yeah.
And they have always been there.
And we now know it's even more irrational because I have a family history of it, which we discussed.
I was going to say.
So we know that I can eat of any container, any food that Lan makes.
I was firstly going to, in all seriousness, acknowledge, like, when you said that had a genuine, like, that went through me. The fact that you feel that there was an element that you could have been responsible for this. That's brutal.
It's not nice.
And then I was going to make a slightly more light-hearted point about the fact that there's clearly some genetics.
So it's not my fault after all.
Correct.
It's the conclusion we've reached.
Yeah. Wow. But seriously, that is powerful in not a good way. Which brings me on to, I guess, you two. Like, how's this whole thing impacted you both? Well, individually, we're getting the sense of that, but I suppose collectively, how do you manage something like this as a young couple?
So, I think we've taken it on pretty well. I think even just the fact that we're sat here today talking about it very openly, putting ourselves out there in a pretty public way for those who want to watch and listen to us. I
Loads,
think
thousands and tens of thousands of people.
by the time this airs, yeah, that's where we'll be at.
Millions, potentially.
I think it's, you know, testament to the strength that we've sort of developed over the last few years with that experience. I don't think we would have been in the position, even had you been living in Hong Kong then, to do it so candidly the first time around.
Yeah.
I think it's the sort of benefit of long term and hindsight that's, you know, been a part of this, and for our audience, Lan's been a huge part of the creation of On the Node as well,
100%,
behind the scenes.
CD, creative director. We're not allowed to do anything without her sign off.
That's very true. She reviews all the edits. And, anyway, so I think that's a huge component of it, and I think we've both probably learned a lot about each other as well. You know, for me, I've always known Lan's been a bit of a powerhouse at work. In like a work environment, even though we've never worked together, but to see that sort of skill set in action with her sort of project management of my health was really enlightening, and it's also given another depth of flavour to how empathetic she is as a partner. You know, it's just, you know, she's been so just incredible, just as a supportive partner.
Thank you. I wouldn't describe myself. I wouldn't use the word empathy to describe me ever, but thank you. That's very nice. And to add to that, and one thing that I only now sort of like reflecting on, you know, how our relationship evolved, how our partnership evolved throughout the experience. Everyone's different, you know. The closest couples, the closest friends, they all are unique in their own way. They have their differences, and in most cases, people have the luxury of time to sort of like come together, almost like two like two different puzzle pieces or Legos. And for most cases, people have the luxury of time to sort of like identify the differences and then come together. But the experience that we had, it felt like we were both in like a pressure cooker, and we didn't have. It really highlighted our differences and how we. The way we deal with things so differently, and but because we were under so much pressure, we were forced to sort of like identify those differences, acknowledge those differences, and then find a way to compromise and then come together and like two pieces of a puzzle or like Legos. And I really think that the experience made us so much stronger, our partnership so much stronger than before, really.
Amazing. Neurodiversity and ADHD. Talk to us quickly about that and you.
Yeah, so I think for context, so Lan's very recently been diagnosed with ADHD. So it's not something that we knew about during 2022, but as with a lot of, you know, neurodiversity, it's something you live with your whole life and you just may not be diagnosed with yet. So this is a recent revelation, but I think what we'd love to know from Lan is like how is that, like if you reflect back on 2022, how do you think it helped or hindered you through that process? And again, more recently with the relapse.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point because obviously I've lived with this my whole life. I never knew that I had this until recently, until the recent diagnosis, and reflecting back, I saw a lot of my ADHD came through in the best way possible, really. So one thing about ADHD is that for a lot of people is the ability to hyper focus. And I basically hyper focus on Andy and lymphoma as a topic, as a subject. And I read, well, not everything, but I read. I spent so many days, so many hours reading, researching, and I felt like I had an unlimited amount of energy to be able to focus night and day. I would eat, sleep, walk, research about lymphoma treatments, hospitals, doctors, and I went down a rabbit hole of very good advice, but also a lot of conspiracies around
Reddit, dark corners of Reddit.
Yeah. Not helped by some of my nurses.
No, not at all. Well, we don't have to talk about
let's
that.
not go there.
But yeah, and the ability to hyper focus combined with the need to problem solve, project management, I felt like it came together beautifully, and it actually really helped me rather than hindering anything. So overall, good.
Thumbs up. Excellent.
ADHD, thumbs up.
2 thumbs. So I guess, Lan, just to finish off, what advice would you give to a carer, one with kind of neurotypical mindset, but also neurodiverse partners? And would that advice differentiate according to who you were giving that advice to?
No, I wouldn't say so. I think it's a very universal topic. It's not. Cancer has always been with us for decades and decades and decades now. So, and the biggest advice that I was given, and I can now feel confident giving to people, is that if you have a loved one who's going through cancer therapy, if you are a primary carer to someone who's going through cancer therapy or any treatment, don't forget to take care of yourself. It's the most important thing. Sometimes you get so wrapped up in the storm of making sure everything goes right and making sure that your loved one is okay. You tend to forget about your own well-being, and if you are not well, you cannot be there for them. And the most practical thing that I started doing, actually only recently, because I'll admit I didn't do this the first time, is that when you wake up in the morning, whatever you feel like doing, or whatever you feel like and whatever you feel like doing, that's probably the thing that you need the most that day. So if circumstances allow you to do the things that you need to do that day to take care of you, do it.
And I can second that. From my perspective, is what people need to remember for the cancer patient. They're going to have a medical team checking on them, looking after them physically. They're going to have other friends, other family constantly asking, hey, how are you?
They're going to have co-podcasters.
They're correct. Constantly texting them, asking them how they are and what happened that day. But I think the importance for people to kind of check in on their loved ones is equally important, because
so that's advice for like friends and family to ensure that they're checking on
the carer,
and
as well for the patient. Like I do what I can to make sure Lan's feeling okay, and saying, hey, look, if you need a day to yourself, you have a day to yourself. You go and watch Lady Gaga if you want to go watch Lady Gaga
in Singapore.
I just
which is actually happening, by the way.
Yeah.
On
Bye,
Monday.
Fernando.
Fernando's getting binned off.
So I completely echo with what Lan says, and I think any pressure she put on herself the first time round, I think she's learned from that this time to make sure she takes care of herself better.
Amazing. Well, Lan, thank you so much. You've been nothing short of sensational, as we both expected you would be.
For
Massive.
years, not just tonight.
Yeah, correct. Well, there you go. I can't say that, but definitely for this podcast, you've been sensational. But I believe Andy when he says that. So thank you. We really, really appreciate your candor. I know it got emotional, and some of the things that you said were, very hard hitting. But thank you.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's been really fun.
And hopefully, it's not your last visit to On the Node.
Yeah.
What else have I got to talk about?
Various things, various
Loads.
cameo appearances.
We need to hear how Lady Gaga was.
Correct.
Ooh.
Yeah. Till next time. Right.
Right.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Andy. And don't forget to like, subscribe, comment.
Yeah. All right. And that was On the Node.